Welcome to Breakthrough Success. I'm your host, Mark Gabberty, the content marketing expert, bringing you 5 new episodes every week where I and top-level guests teach you how to take your business to the next level and achieve your breakthrough. Hello, Breakthrough Success listeners. I just wanted you all to know before the episode actually starts, I've been working a little bit behind the scenes to give you something really special. So a while ago, I wrote my book, Content Marketing Secrets, which helps people create, promote, and optimize their content for growth and revenue. And I just put the finishing touches together to offer that for free to anyone who is interested. So if you want your free copy of Content Marketing Secrets, all you have to do is head over to markgabberty.com/book. Now, let's jump right into the episode. One of the big things that we need as business owners is a story for our brand. And this is something that I feel like we don't really value too much until the time to present comes, until it's time for us to make the pitch, until it's time for us to communicate with people in a networking type of setting. So a brand story is something that is very powerful, and it's not just something for the networking events. It's so much more, and you literally intertwine the story into your entire brand, into your copy and everything you create. We're going to go into that in this episode, and the person who's going to talk with us about crafting our brand story, well, he helps others craft their stories and expand their influence. That is what he does. He is also the guy behind Engage, the company that exists to help businesses connect with prospects more easily in order to increase sales. So today's guest for episode 235 of the Breakthrough Success podcast is none other than Jeff Loehr. Jeff, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks a lot, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Jeff, I'm really looking forward to this interview. I mean, storytelling is just something that is so important for marketing, and maybe even one of the most underrated things in all of marketing, because that story is what connects people to you, connects people to your brand, allows them to relate to what you're doing. So I'm wondering if you could just share with us a little bit deeper, why exactly do you believe crafting our brand story is so important? Because I feel like this is something that people may not value. It's not at the top of their list.
And we only have a half an hour, right? So
maybe over 45 minutes, I think.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's critically important, like you say, for connecting with and engaging your audience. And it's one of these things as human beings. And I think in business, we've learned to really focus on the analytic. We've really learned to focus on the neocortex of our brain, the modern part of our brain, the thinking part of our brain. We want to impress everybody with the thinking part of our brain, how smart we are, our credentials, all the things that we've done. And the problem is that nobody actually cares about any of that stuff. Nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about what you've done. What they care about is themselves and the problem you solve. And the way that they engage with you is really through the core of the brain, the reptilian part of the brain. That's a much more emotional beast. That's more, the fight or flight type response. And human beings have been working since the beginning of language, since even before language, to create content that engages that part of the brain. And that's the story. And it's remarkable that stories are the same across regions, across times, across cultures that have never met, but they tell very similar stories. This is something that Joseph Campbell found in his research. And the reason for that is that it's just sort of built into our DNA. It's just the way we think and communicate. So when we talk about trying to connect and engage our audience as a brand, it's tapping into that same capacity, that same way of thinking that's in our DNA by crafting a story that's going to connect with your audience. And that's really why stories are important, because it's baked into our DNA. It is the way that we communicate and the way that we listen.
And I mean, listening is I find it interesting we communicate in that sense. And like the way we communicate, we do communicate in story, and the stories we tell have a big impact on how people perceive us. So, like one of the things that I do want to focus on also is like how exactly do we develop our brand story? Because that's just an area where like maybe people know that the story is important. Maybe they have so many pieces within this story, like a giant jigsaw puzzle, but they don't know how to put the pieces together or which pieces to even use. So,
Sure.
can you share with us how to develop one?
Well, so the way we think about a brand story is might be a little bit different than people expect. What we look at in terms of a brand story is actually telling a story about your customer, about your ideal customer. And we think it's critically important to focus on them because that's what they're most concerned about, right? That's what they're most looking for is something about them. And they're looking for how they transform. It turns out that people are really engaged by and people really buy transformation. So the way that we look at crafting your stories is really to look at your ideal customer and ask yourself what is missing in their life and what is standing in their way, what is keeping them from being fulfilled, from filling that gap, right? And you can think of this as in a story as your character and a villain. And there's the character that needs to be complete in some way. So if you think of Cinderella, right? Cinderella needs to grow up. She needs to become an independent person, but she's kept where she is by the villain, which is the evil stepmother. And when we're crafting a brand story, the character is our customer, and the villain is whatever it is that's keeping them from being complete. And then we come into the story, our businesses come into the story as the mentor who's going to help them be complete. So the services and everything that we do come in as a mentor, as a way of solving the problem and defeating the villain so that the character, our customer, can be complete. And we want to call the character to action. So if you think of Cinderella again, we have the evil stepmother as the villain, and then obviously the fairy godmother comes in, and she is the mentor. She has the magical tools. She has the way to transform Cinderella from where she is to what she needs to be, and she calls Cinderella to action, to go to the ball, to have the experience, to break out of where she is. And we want to be sure to call our customers to action in our brand story, and then show them what they gain by working with us. So what is the reward that they get? Cinderella gets to be a mature woman. She gets to break away from her evil stepmother, and our customers, they gain some sort of transformation, some reward that turns them into a hero. And when we craft it that way and make a story about them, people really get it, they really enjoy it, and they start to understand in much more depth the problem you solve and for whom you solve it.
And I really like the idea of positioning your brand as that mentor, that de facto, that differentiator that is going to be the hero in that story. And like having that villain, whether it's let's say like it's not hitting the goal or something like that, and positioning yourself as the hero. I mean, that's where storytelling really comes powerful for any brand who like just like any brand in general. But one of the things
well, but if I just want to be clear, we advocate making your customer the hero. So the brand should come in as a mentor, should come in as the support to make the customer the hero. So we always put the customer front and center rather than taking that hero mantle ourselves, because nobody really likes it when you come in and you say, all right, I'm going to be the hero in the story. I'm going to teach you what to do. You know, what they like is when you're talking about how they transform and how they can get to the next level.
Oh, that makes sense. Like you're just the mentor. You're not the mentor and the hero. You're just the mentor.
You're just the mentor. Your character, your customer is the hero. And they become the hero. You know, something's missing in their life, and you enable them to be complete, and you enable them to be the hero. So we need to position our brands as the fairy godmother. We need to position our brands as Yoda or Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? We position our brands as those who are helping the hero to become a hero. And when we're telling that hero story about the customer, that's the kind of thing that resonates for them and that they really start to understand. And that's also what differentiates us, because so often we're going around talking about, oh, I'm so great, I'm this wonderful financial advisor, or I'm a great stylist, or I'm a wonderful strategist, and I'm so good at this, and I'm wonderful, and here's the reason why I'm so wonderful at it. It doesn't connect. But when we talk about, I was giving this talk to a bunch of stylists, 15 stylists around the room, and I asked them beforehand, what do you do? And each one of them said, oh, I'm a stylist, I'm a stylist, I'm a stylist, right? 15 times. And that doesn't differentiate. When you're positioning yourself as this great stylist, you don't stand out from anybody else. But through going through the exercise, we discovered that actually they all do different things. One of them works with mid-level executives who need to redesign themselves in order to position themselves for an executive job. Another woman worked with retired women who wanted to redefine themselves for another phase in their life. Somebody else worked with divorced women who wanted to reinvent their style. They each had very specific characters, and they made them heroes in very specific ways, even though they all played the same mentor-type role.
And I'm really happy you stepped in and you explained that, because here I was thinking that like you're a mentor and a hero, but you're just a mentor and the customer.
You're just a mentor.
That definitely makes it a lot more powerful when you frame it that way, because customer being the hero, it's like in the end, that's what we want to do. We want to give the customers the results we're looking for. And I really like that framing of like how you're telling your story and being the mentor for that customer. But how do we connect our story and that sense of mentorship with everything within our business? It's easy to tell the story, but when you've got campaigns, you've got funnels, you've got copy, you've got social media, how do we continue to keep the story strong on all of those platforms?
Well, all of your platforms, everything needs to be telling the story. It's all elements of the story. So you might not tell the entire story with every piece of content that you put out, but every piece of content needs to be aligned with that story. Now, we'll say that you need to have a story for each problem that you solve. So if you're thinking of a problem, we think of a problem as a character-villain combination. So when you have that type of a situation where there's a clear character and villain, and then there's a different character and villain, you're going to need to create a separate story, and that means you're going to have separate content and separate ways of engaging for that story. But every element, but within that vertical, so within that story, whether you're tweeting about it or you've got pictures on Instagram or you're guiding people through your funnel, every piece of content is telling that story. And what we do is we really use a very simple funnel where we talk about awareness at the top end, and then we draw people into consideration where we put them through a nurture email campaign, or you can do a mail campaign, or you can do advertising, whatever works for you there. But you explain the elements of the story so people start to understand how they can position, or how they end up positioned as the hero, right? So they can start imagining what that transformation looks like. And you can keep giving them little bits and little bits so that they start to get the whole picture over time. And that's how you do it. It's just making sure that everything you put out is aligned with the story you want to tell. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it's being very intentional with what you put out. And I feel like if you write down your story, or you have the main points in front of you as you're creating the content, it's easier for you to produce content and publish content.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, I thought you were going to add on, so I didn't want to cut you off.
Okay, well, I was going to say absolutely. I think it's critical that you know your story, and that's the first step of our process with engaging with our clients, is teaching them that story. And then we take them through a process where they learn the story, right? And they draft it and they play with it and they understand it and they practice it. And then we from the bigger story, we create the little summary story and talk about the character. And you can get into a lot of depth, and really drill down into each element of the story. But you start by understanding that story and really getting into it and breathing it and living it, right? And when you have it written down and you really get it, the thing that happens is you start to look for it everywhere. You start to look for it in what other people do. You start to look for it in all of your writing. You sort of become tuned to this idea of, am I telling the story? Is this the right way? Am I making my customer the hero? Am I talking about how I'm going to present myself as a mentor, right? And it just becomes a way of thinking. And when you get there, right, it's phenomenal. It's like magic. We have people that go to networking groups, and all of a sudden they can tell their story in this concise, clear way. And it's just a massive load off, because finally people understand what they do and they understand why they're different, and they don't have to put in nearly the effort that they used to have to put into it.
And one of the things that I also want to ask you about stories, because like um, again, like if you have like the story down and you have it written, it's easy for you to put it into your content. But for some people, the story changes. Now, like if for some people they may feel more established with where they are, their story may not change for a while. But let's say the content marketer decides to shift more towards productivity, or the author who helps with book marketing wants to shift more towards content marketing. So, how can we change the story and keep people who have been following the current storyline?
Well, I think that the overall brand story, it's like thinking about your brand, right? And your brand isn't going to change significantly. It's what you do is going to pretty much stay what you do, right? And when it changes, and you update it and you make the changes that you need to make. I think in general, though, it's trying to find that brand story. We actually called it engaged story. When you find that story that ties everything together in a way that really expresses your brand, and then the way you express it, the content that you tell, might be different. So I'll give you an example. The most interesting man in the world is a really famous example of this, right? Because the Dos Equis commercial with the most interesting man in the world.
Yeah.
So the story that they put together is one of solving a problem for insecure male beer drinkers in a bar. And what they really needed was a way to enter into conversation with the people next to me. So basically they were talking to me, right? Because I go into a bar, no idea how to enter into conversation with anybody. So the idea was they give you the most interesting man in the world as a mentor, right? And you order a Dos Equis, and then by ordering a Dos Equis, the person next to you says something like, "Stay thirsty, my friend," or did you see the one where he, and that you start this conversation, you start this engagement. But there are lots of ways that they could express that campaign. There are lots of different stories that they could tell around the most interesting man in the world. They could, do it in print. They could do it in lots of different media. They do it online. They do it social media. So there are lots of ways to express that idea and tell different stories without changing that core brand story that's about giving that person at the bar, the ability to enter into conversation with somebody next to him.
And I mean, I never really thought of the commercial like that, probably because of my age, but like it does click now, because like people will buy that product now just to start a conversation now. So it's very powerful what you can do with the right storytelling. You can even get people in this case to buy a product in order to feel like a desirable emotion, like the sense of fitting in, the sense of belonging. the ability to have a conversation with the person sitting next to them. So, like you could convey a lot of different emotions and statuses with the right storytelling behind your product. So I really like that was a really good example. But one of the things that I also want to address is that some people, when they feel like they're crafting their brand stories, maybe it just sounds like a little basic or it's not the best story out there. And I'm wondering, what do you believe holds most people back from being able to craft these really epic brand stories where you've got like the villain, you as the mentor, and the customer as the hero?
Well, I think what holds people back is mostly just not thinking about the framework. I think when people have the framework, it's actually pretty straightforward and pretty easy to do. When you do the problems that people have when they do have the framework is they tend to really struggle with getting out of their own heads, getting out of this idea of, I have to convince everybody how great I am first, and focus instead on the customer first. That tends to be the biggest challenge. And then the second biggest challenge that we come across is when you really start to put together this story, you have to very clearly define, the problem you solve and how you solve that problem. So you have to know what you do, and you have to know what you do for whom. And we find people, a lot, they start talking to us and it's just not clear for them. And that's one of the problems that people have in business development or in marketing, and it's when it's not clear for them what they do, when they haven't defined it perfectly for themselves, then it becomes very difficult to create the story for others. So the first issue is, one, know the framework, know what the framework is for telling a really engaging story that's going to grab your audience. And then the second one is to work out each part of it so that you know what you do, you know the problem you solve, you know for whom, you know what they get out of it in a very clear and concise way.
And I really like how it comes down to a framework, because I feel like some people, they overcomplicate the idea of telling a story about their brand that becomes the story that customers think of when they think of the brand. So I really like that whole framework approach where the system is there in place for you to use, just up to you to use it. And one of the things that I want to ask also, with storytelling in mind, one of the things that is true about all of us is that we all face certain challenges throughout our journey. So I'm wondering, Jeff, if you could share one big challenge you have faced on your journey and a powerful lesson you learned during that challenge.
Well, I mean, the big challenge that I had was communicating. So the big challenge I had once I developed a strategy for an underground mining operation in South Africa. This great strategy. We were going to innovate the way they did mining. We were going to automate mining at 4 kilometers underground. We were going to change the world, And we did all of this as a small group up in an office in Johannesburg, and it was great, And we put together our PowerPoint slides, and we went out and we took it to the miners, and they just looked at us with a blank expression on their face, like, what the hell is PowerPoint, and why are we talking about this, right? And then the middle managers, they just weren't interested in the way we were telling it, and they didn't connect with it. And it was really through that experience that I learned to use story to connect, and to use story instead of just talking about, hey, here are the great things we're going to do. We're going to innovate, and we're going to increase revenue. We're going to cut cost. We really told a story about how we were going to empower people, how we were going to change the mining company, about the roles that people could play, and turned it into something that was about them rather than about us. And taking something from the ivory tower of corporate wherever, and turning it into a story that really matters for a miner who works 4,000 meters underground in the most difficult conditions, right? That is an experience in storytelling that teaches you a lot and taught me a lot. And that was really the spark that transformed me from I'm a strategist to I'm a storyteller and I help people tell their stories.
And I mean, you could have like the best strategy, you could have the best approach, but with the wrong storytelling, it's not going to work, even if it
It
is a
it
very
goes nowhere.
revolutionary idea.
The best strategy with the worst without a good story goes
Doesn't
nowhere.
matter.
A mediocre strategy with a great story that
It's going to
really
win.
engages can transform the world. And that's the difference. It's the level of engagement. And even if you're making a small change in the organization, if you can communicate it well, you can make that change. But if you're trying to change the world, even if it's the most positive change and everybody wants it and loves it, but you can't get them to see it and they don't understand it, then it goes nowhere. And that's the difference, is the storytelling.
I mean, yeah, I mean, storytelling, it does make a really big difference. We could go on and on about this with examples like politicians, like they are very careful with these stories that they tell, and they spend a lot of time crafting those stories just to win over certain votes. So, like, storytelling
Well,
is very important.
and if you look at politicians that win versus politicians that lose.
Good point.
And politicians that win tend to tell a very good story about their constituents, about the voters, whereas those who lose are talking about primarily themselves. And that's a big difference, right? So if you want to run for office, then you really need to craft a story about your constituents and show how they're going to become the hero by voting for you. And politics is a great place to see this in action, because and right now is a really good time because you have all these primary contenders, right? And they're coming up. Some of them are coming up with great stories that just dominate.
And you got some people who they just tell a really bad story once and they try to change course because they realize they messed up, but then it's too late for them at that point.
Yeah, well, yeah. I probably want to think about it before you tell it, but
Yeah, always helps.
they need my template. I mean, what can I say, right?
And one of the things that I also want to cover, I mean, like we've talked a lot about storytelling, and one of the places you tend to find a lot of stories is in books. And I'm like, I read as many books as I possibly can get my hands on the time that I have while I'm not working. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could share with us three book recommendations that you believe will have a positive impact on us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of them is Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces. So that's the really the basis for a lot of the storytelling, and that's where he explains how storytelling has sort of evolved and why it's how it's a part of our DNA, and explores lots of different stories. And it's a dense book, but it's a wonderful book, just filled with lots of interesting stories. And then when you read that one, you're going to need the book that explains it. And that's written by Christopher Fogler, and it's the writer's journey. And he has taken a lot of this mythology and turned it into really practical guidance for how to think about crafting stories. And he works for companies, like Disney, and helping them improve their stories and their movies. And I think this is a great way to think about to start thinking about how you build your stories for your business. And then finally, there's a story from a guy in Australia, Sean Callahan, called "Putting Stories to Work," and his business is called Anecdote, and he really talks about using stories. So as we talk about brand story or engaged story and defining your brand using this story methodology, he talks about how to tell anecdotes and how to use anecdotes to communicate and to engage people in your daily life, in your management life, in your business. So I think it's a little bit different take on what we do, but I think it's a great a great way to think about that.
Jeff, thank you for sharing those great book recommendations. Those will all be in the show notes, markberry.com/E235. For anyone interested in content marketing, we'll also throw in content marketing secrets, which you can get free, just pay for the shipping. That's markberry.com/book. That will also be in the show notes. And before we wrap up this episode, Jeff, I've asked you several questions throughout our time together, but what do you believe is one question that we need to be asking ourselves more often?
Well, I think what we need to be asking ourselves is how do we make our customers the hero? So how do we make our customers succeed? How are we empowering them to do things and stop thinking quite as much about ourselves?
Jeff, thank you for sharing with us that great question, all of your great insights throughout our time together. Now, Breakthrough Success listeners, Jeff actually has some good resources for us. He has a free guide for us. He also has a workshop. So, Jeff, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about that with us.
Yeah, sure. Well, you can go to our website, engagenow.biz, and you can download our guide. It's actually a marketing guide that just teaches you how to craft your story and then takes you through the process of actually developing your funnel along the lines of your engaged story. And then we have a workshop here in New York we do once a month where we work with businesses. Representatives from different businesses come together and we go through crafting your story right there, where you get feedback from us, you get feedback from other people in the room, you get to see what lands, what doesn't land, and it's a really good experience. So just a day working with us, you can accomplish a lot in defining your brand. And you can find out everything you need to know about that on our website as well.
Jeff, thank you for sharing those resources with us and for sharing all of your great insights on this episode of Breakthrough Success. And again, all those links and everything that we've mentioned will be in the show notes, markroberto.com/E235. But Jeff, I can't thank you enough for sharing all of your great insights with us. It was such a pleasure to have you on Breakthrough Success.
Likewise, Mark, it's been great. Love the podcast, and it's been wonderful talking to you.
How does over 100 retweets per day sound to you? My free ebook, 27 Ways to Get More Retweets on Twitter, has you covered. I use the methods within this ebook to get over 10,000 retweets every single quarter. To learn